Good morning, everyone. We're continuing with our discussion based on Swami's book of Money Magnetism. And as some of you are getting used to, Monday is Money Day, in the sense that it's the day that I remind you all that now the ministry that I've been following, which I call the Mission of the Masters, has grown beyond what the community I've been living in can easily support. Because of the COVID, we've discovered all kinds of new ways to expand our reach. So I need your help. If you're benefiting from this, you can make a one-time donation through Asha Joy website, or you can go on to Patreon, which is this marvelous platform for supporting creative people. Type my name into that, Asha Nayaswami, and you'll find all the information you need about what we're doing there. Also, my dear friend Ishani, who takes care of all things social media for me, tells me that about half the people who regularly watch the YouTube channel do not subscribe. They just go regularly. Subscribing is not very intrusive. I think it simply means you get a notice whenever I post something new, which is very intrusive because I'm posting new all the time. But I hope you don't mind. For reasons that I can't begin to understand, which is why she helps me. If you who watch regularly on YouTube also subscribe to my channel, Inner Life with Asha, I don't know, some kind of manna falls from heaven in ways that will benefit our ability to reach more people, which is actually all that we're trying to do. So consider these options. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, dearest friend Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Awaken within us a deep understanding of the divine laws which govern our life and happiness. Give us clarity in wisdom, then courage in action, and joy in experience, that we may live in this world as you intended, not as a place of difficulty and suffering, but of learning and at times of entertainment, as you say, that we may be good children of our Divine Mother and find our way quickly and graciously back to our divine home. Om. Peace. Amen. So, I'm going through chapter by chapter in this book, and the chapters are not long, but they're too long for me to read. So I'm not doing this book as I've done some other documents where I actually read and then comment exactly. The first chapter is What is True Wealth? And then chapter 2 is Seek Security First Within Yourself. And after that comes a chapter of Don't Limit Your Demands. What he means is don't limit what God can give you. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about these subjects, and we'll just see how it goes. I'm actually, which is the good thing, I'm actually sort of feeling my way a little bit through this this subject so far. I picked it up partly because it is. Let me think how to say this. I'm going to sort of try to describe my own consciousness in relationship to this, and I'm doing it partly because I myself am trying to find my footing on this subject, which is one of the reasons why I picked it up. As I've mentioned to all of you many times, and sometimes, and some of you know me well, I've never actually been a person. I've never been a businesswoman. I have never been an entrepreneur in the financial side of things. I take that back. I'm definitely an entrepreneur. I'm constantly creating from nothing. It's just mother's milk to me to do that. But I've never been in charge of the financials. Swamiji I had a checkbook at the very beginning when I was running the kitchen. He took it away from me and never gave me another one. He just said, running a checkbook was not my intuitive skill. He had me running a business very briefly at the beginning. Well, I did it for a couple of years, but I don't have a head for business. So all of that caused me to think I didn't have a head for money, which was not really true because I have a tremendous head for prosperity, which is, prosperity to me includes money, but it's a bigger subject. It's abundance. It's how, and just as it happens, the class I just gave on Saturday, which was January 30th, was on prosperity and abundance. So these kind of have gotten a little mixed up in my head, what I said when, because I try to forget as fast as I can. But um, I've always had a heart for abundance. I've always had I've automatically operated a great many principles that are the same principles as money magnetism. It's just I was working with abundance. I was working with abundance in other ways and in other areas. But as I began to work as an entrepreneur, developing Ananda's different parts, especially developing in Silicon Valley, I was part of a team in which other people had very specific skill at running checkbooks, meaning they just knew how that aspect of creation works, the money aspect, and worked it really did and do work it really well. And I worked my abundance side. And I'm a very good fundraiser in the sense that I never ask for money unless I know it's the right thing to ask for. And I only ask for it when I know that the flow of energy is already there and we just need to plug in the money to make it work. And as a consequence, by the grace of God, many things have manifested in the context of the teams that I've been privileged to work with. Personally, just because of circumstances, there was always somebody close to me who knew how to run the checkbook. And literally, I was way, way, way into adulthood. I'd never balanced a checkbook. I'd never opened a bank account. By that point, I had bank accounts in my name and I didn't know how to write checks. But I just never had to look at the numbers. And numbers don't talk to me. A lot of numbers talk to people. I know my friend Tremon, who's one of the leaders of the Seattle, one of the founding leaders of the Seattle community, and built the temple in the community and amazingly paid off all the debt on their temple in 3 months. $1 million they paid off in 3 months just recently. So he's very, very good with this. He was a CPA. He probably may still be, but he said he can just look at a graph of numbers and he can just feel which ones are not accurate. I mean, the numbers talk to him. I mean, I can look at a poem or a paragraph or a letter, and all those words talk to me, but I mean it in the same way. The words sort of talk to me. I remember when I was still learning to write and I was trying to get over a lot of inner blocks I had. Um, Swami, we were in the middle of the litigation at that point, and Swami wanted some of us to write a letter protesting something that the plaintiffs in that case had done to us. It was very important. And I was in Assisi, and Swamiji was taking a group of people to town, and we were going to go out, shopping. We were going to go out to a pizza. It was all a really big deal. But I couldn't go unless I got that letter done. Otherwise, he was going to have me stay home and work on it, which is the best way to beat procrastination is punishment and reward. So I got up really early and I wrote what was actually, and I say to this day, because I recently saw it, was a very good letter. And then Swami knew what the whole game was. And before I could go to town, Swami had to read the letter and make sure it was okay. And just as it happened, he was stretched out on the couch and had it in front of him reading it, and I was kneeling behind him reading over his shoulder. And he just, went through and it was fine. And he came to a certain point and he pointed to a certain sentence, a certain phrase, and he suggested a correction. And my response was, I knew there was something wrong there, but I just couldn't figure out how to fix it. And very wonderfully, Swami looked at me and said, if you could tell that there was something wrong with that sentence, he said, you're a very good writer, which was incredibly confirming to me and immensely helping when I had to break through my resistance to it. But in this context, it was like you could have put numbers in front of me, and Fremont and other people I know could have sensed there was something off with this number. So I know what the context is, where you can be really intuitive that just numbers talk to you. They're language, but they're not language to me. Words are language to me. Swami himself, though, when we were talking about, he had this remarkable ability. I mentioned it, I believe, in Swami Kriyananda as we've known him. I tell this long story about a negotiation with a realtor and so on. And then later on, Swami wanted to call the realtor, wanted Padma to call the realtor. As it happened, she was the one. And she was rifling through her papers looking for the number, phone number. And Swami just recited the phone number. And Padma said, how did you know the phone number? You just glanced at his card. Well, Swami's first answer was, but I concentrated completely. And the other answer was, well, a combination of numbers is a specific reality. And you look at the reality and you know it like you know a person's face. And he just sort of, and I said something about numbers just have no personality to me. He said, every number has a personality. And ever since then, actually, I've tried to play that game. When I see a license plate or I see a phone number, I try to personify the entity. I mean, there's a whole science of this. This is not just woo-woo new age stuff. Numerology is a whole science. To just try to feel what the personality of that set of numbers is. Well, I'm saying all of that, partly in my own mind. To be proficient at something means to be profoundly intuitive about it, not merely just able to do it on a mundane level. So also what I realize, and now here I am, I'm saying all this to all of you because I'm trying to figure out how to get deeper into this subject in a way that's more authentic to me. And I've been trying to reconcile, here now we're just having true confessions, I've been trying to reconcile for decades how I can be very good at prosperity and not very clear about money. But I think it's partly because I want to be able to do money from the same heart of intuition that to me is what it means to be proficient at something. And it's just never been my karma. I've never been my karma. And I've also been wonderfully happy being able to avoid having to deal with it. Because if other people close to me would do it, I love community because somebody's always better at it than me. And I can bake them cookies, and then something else, they'll take care of it, whatever it is. When somebody's asked me at different times, well, what would happen if you had to do this yourself? I'd say, well, so-and-so is very good at it and they like the cookies I bake. And to me, that's an actual answer. But it's not an actual answer if there's energy blocks within you. Or if there is reluctance, or if there is an unwillingness, that's the actual word I'm looking at, which is my mind tilts, and I'm not going to put out the energy to get clear. It also, which is less true now, but was true for a while for me, if you're afraid of it. When I asked Swami once about karma, how can you tell if you've overcome a karma? He says, when you're no longer afraid of it. So I asked him the horrifying opposite question. You mean if something frightens me, I'm still going to have to face and overcome it? He said, yes. Whoa, think of all that frightens me, especially obvious things like physical pain or profound disappointment, betrayal, that sort of thing. I'm not going to draw that to its finest point, but it's actually true. And that's why the masters are so powerful, because they're not afraid of anything. Jesus walked directly into his crucifixion. I mean, he went to Jerusalem and he taunted the people who had power over him. And then when they came to arrest him, he stepped forward and allowed himself to be arrested. And when he was there with Pontius Pilate and refused to answer the questions, Pontius Pilate himself became exasperated. Don't you know I have the power to crucify you or the power to free you? And then Jesus answered and he said, even now my Father could send legions of angels to rescue me. The only power you have over me is what God has given me, meaning you don't have power over me. God has delivered me to this for his own reasons, but even now God could rescue me. But how could he be like that? He was totally unafraid. What can you do to me? You can kill me, you can torture my body. You can't touch me. Because he was God consciousness. That's our real abundance. And any other reality that we depend on, we are always going to be insecure. Which is why when people start trying to hoard money in order to feel safe, they can never hoard enough. Because it is inherently not the source of real security. Because inherent in the necessity to hoard so much is the fear of what would happen if I don't have it. So in the very positive action, we are actually affirming the weakness that we're trying to overcome. You see how subtle and interesting it all gets? So in the context of whether or not you don't have to become perfect at everything in order to be liberated. I was specifically remembering a friend of mine who was a very good teacher. This all happened decades ago at Ananda with individuals who have long since faded from the picture. The man was a very good teacher, and 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 surprisingly unegoically related to teaching. This is sort of the funny way that the mind works, partly because for some reason it wasn't a source of enormous self-worth to him. He did it very easily and he did it very well. What he wanted to be was a good businessman, and he had no particular talent for it. And Swamiji kept trying to persuade him to go with his strengths and to serve through what he was very good at, and he couldn't. He wanted to be a businessman. Swami encouraged him not to. He insisted. He failed. Swami at business because it just wasn't his karmic strength. And Swami said to him, you don't have to be good at business to grow spiritually. It's something that you're imposing on it. In other words, you don't have to be good at everything. You just have to do whatever is given to you to do with the best energy that you can bring to it. But the question of being afraid of something and willfully trying to hide from it is something else. And so God takes care of it. It's really nothing you have to worry about because God takes care of it, and God took care of it with me and has put me into positions now where I have to take my sense of abundance and I have to take it into money, which is why Monday is now Money Day. And I tell everybody on Monday that, guess what? I have to try to attract more money. And by the grace of God, it's absolutely working effortlessly. And I'm beginning to understand why it's working, and I'm not going to presume on it, and it's working because of the generosity of all of you. But it's also working because I actually have been following, and this is my little notes, many of the things that Swamiji really talks to us about being really important. And I'm just going to go over to here. Swamiji talks about how he himself has always been able to attract whatever he needs. He says, sometimes when people are telling you what to attract, he said, they tell you to visualize extremely clearly and exactly just what you want. I heard him talking about this on a recording that's on the internet called How to Attract Money. And he said, in some manifesting guidelines, we'll tell you to visualize exactly. You want a car, you visualize the make and the model, you see it parked in your driveway, you hold the key in your hand, you imagine yourself opening the door and starting the car. And Swami's comment was very interesting. He said, that will work. It wasn't like that won't work. He said, that will work. And then he told this very enjoyable story that he learned from a prosperity teacher in Australia, just as it happened, a friend who was hosting him in that country. And the man tells this story about someone who dies, who goes to heaven, and St. Peter is showing him around. And then they come to this place where all these really beautiful things are just all stacked, higgledy-piggledy all over the place, just a big storeroom, just unused, unopened, beautiful things. And the new guest to heaven says, St. Peter, what is this? And Peter says, this is the heavenly junkyard. And the newcomer is totally bewildered. The junkyard, what is that? He said, well, these are all the things that were intended for people on earth, but they weren't able to receive them. They didn't open to receive them. So we just had to put them into the junkyard here. And the newcomer says, but that's ridiculous. He said, look at that beautiful BMW over there. He said, I would have loved to have that car. Peter says, well, that's very interesting that you point to that, because in fact, that BMW was intended for you. Me, he said, I would have loved to have it. Yes, perhaps, he said. But whenever you visualized a car, you thought of a Volkswagen. So what that story is intended, I think the man who said it was talking about aim high, visualize the BMW. But what Swami was saying is, we shouldn't impose limitations on the divine. We shouldn't be the ones saying, this much is how much I'm going to get. Now, of course, Swami says that will work. But he says the method that he always uses is to tune in on a more deeper level that money is a flow of energy. And what we want is a flow of energy that will take us to our goal. And then we have to ask our question, what is our goal? Is our goal to have that really nice car to be able to drive around? Or is our goal to be able to continue the flow of energy to accomplish whatever higher reality we're trying to move into for ourselves or for others? And this is a necessary tool along the way. It's not an end in itself, but it's a facilitator for the energy flow. So Swamiji says what he always thinks about is not, what I need a car to be able to drive around to give classes. He thinks about, I need to be able to go see people and share Master's teaching with them. What I see happening is this flow of energy going out, and many receptive hearts are hearing Master's teachings, and I'm able to go wherever I'm called. Then a car is needed. But to ask just for a car is to take that whole open flow of energy and to say to Divine Mother, this is how it must be done. On Saturday, I was also telling the story about when I was writing this book, which is the first book I published, Swami Kriyananda as We Have Known Him. It's a whole series of stories of my experience and other people's experience. It was the first book I'd written, and I had to really think about it. And Swamiji was very clear to me that any story about him had to be illustrating an important principle. He didn't just want a fan book in which I talk about how great he was, and he was great in this way and great in that way. Yeah, he was, but everything he did had a purpose, which was to educate and elevate us. And when I was trying to bring the book to a conclusion, Swami invited me to go over to Gurgaon, India, where he was living at the time, in the house that he had there. And the guest room was a tent on the roof of the house that he'd set up for Jyotish and Devi, but they weren't there, so I stayed in their room, the tent on the roof. It was quite luxurious and quite pleasant, and for several weeks we worked on the book. Really, I polished it, I finished it, he reviewed it, and then certain gaps, stories he still wanted told, I wrote those, various things, and he read every word of it. And for me, it was like I had taken a tremendous number of intuitive leaps in writing this book, interpreting people's stories, attributing motives to Swamiji, and I felt very confident when I did it. By this point, 2006, I'd been talking about him for decades. But it was still, he went over every word, and he disputed one story. And it was that I had written that Swami felt that he was too youthful in his appearance, and that it would be better if he looked more elderly, because then people would respect him more. And I had written in the draft that Swami prayed for his hair to turn white. Swami's reading it, and he points to that. He said, I did not. Yes, you did, sir, I remember. And then I still can see it. We were standing at a certain point where we often were standing as I was leaving. We talked about it. We were discussing the issue. You said it to me. He says repeatedly, I did not. Yes, you did. I did not. Just boom, like that. So we parted on those terms. And I went up to my tent. And in the middle of the night, like, literally at midnight, my subconscious mind becomes more receptive. I popped awake and said, of course he didn't pray to have white hair, because he would never pray to Master. He would never tell Master how to solve the problem. He would never limit Master's capability. All Swami did was say, this is a problem. And he put the problem in Master's hands. It wasn't that Swami remembered the incident, although I remember the incident, but he knew in principle he would never have done that. And it was an odd mistake for me to make, and I didn't make any other mistakes like that in the whole book. But I think it happened because Divine Mother really wanted me to get the point, so that I would always examine everything I did in terms of the principle and make sure that not even in the slightest way was I misrepresenting Swamiji's consciousness, because it was that important to him. I mean, look at the book, like this, how thick it is. And he was adamant that that sentence will not be in this book, because it was the wrong principle. Because the principle is, I'm here to serve. And now we're talking money magnetism. I'm not talking to people who are interested in money. I'm talking to people who are interested in God realization, and money is one of the things that we need in order to do our work. But we have to do it in exactly the way that leads to God realization. And so the question is, what is the flow of energy I'm trying to accomplish? And if we really want to be effective for God realization, how can I serve? What is required for me to serve? Swamiji always lived very comfortably, in the sense that whenever he needed anything, he would just acquire it. And he would manifest the money. He would attract the money for anything he needed. He bought a computer like practically the instant they were available. He was he's a very early adopter, I think is the word they use, for any tool that would increase the flow of energy in the direction that he wanted to go. And being able to write a book on a computer just liberates so much of your creative energy from the weight of the material plane, that as soon as that was available to him, and the cost just didn't matter. The same thing when there was music writing technology available. He went right to it, even before it was refined, and had to do it several more times, because it wasn't things he wanted, it was tools. He wanted the tools that were necessary for him to be able to express the energy. And his focus at all times was on the energy that he was trying to express. And then when these needs would come into that flow, there was already within him this confident relationship to the flow of abundance and the flow of energy. And this, there was no necessity to introspect about motive. And there was no thought that these desires were in any way frivolous, because his energy was clean and pure and committed to the ideals that he was working for. One of the ways Swami talks about it, we need to be completely secure in our understanding that this is an appropriate request. And the only way to be that secure is to have high ideals and a clear conscience, that you're really actually living up to your high ideals, or at least that you're sincerely doing your best. So I think I'm going to stop the conversation right now, but I think I'll start tomorrow with high ideals and a clear conscience. Okay? God bless you.